Hey friends, and welcome to All by My Shelf. I'm Miss Rachel, and it's so nice to see you. Today's panel is We're All in This Together, Writing Ensemble Cast. Four incredible YA authors are here to talk to you today, with the help of Alex Abraham, a rockstar bookseller, about what it takes to write a multi-point of view book and make it work. Those authors are Marieke Nijkamp, Alsaid, Stephanie Kate Strohm, and RuthAnne Snow. If you're a Glenside patron, make sure you click the link in the description marked Glenside. That'll take you to a page telling you all of the e-copies you're currently able to check out or put on hold. But if you're more of a hard copy person, it's okay. There's a form there that you can fill out that will tell you exactly which books you can mark, put on hold as soon as the library is able to reopen. I hope you enjoy this panel.
Thank you all for being here to this awesome panel organized by Rachel Shirley, book superhero. My name is Alex Abraham. I am a Boston-based bookseller and Twitter meme maker, and I am here to moderate the panel. But before we begin, I just wanted to give the authors a chance to introduce themselves, so you guys can take it away.
My name is Alsaid. I am the author of the recently released We Didn't Ask for This, which is about a bunch of kids at an international school who lock themselves to the doors of the school, don't let anyone in or out until their environmental demands are met.
Hi, I'm Marieke Nijkamp. I'm the author of the recently released Oracle Code, which is a YA graphic novel featuring a young Barbara Gordon who gets shot, ends up in a wheelchair, and has to solve mysteries. And the upcoming Even If We Break, which is a YA thriller about 5 teens who go to a cabin in the woods to play their RPG one last time, and then things go wrong. And one of them disappears, and it all sort of escalates from there.
I'm RuthAnne Snow, the author of When the Truth Unravels, which is about 4 girls who attend prom together after one of them recently attempted suicide. And 2 timelines, the night of prom with flashbacks throughout their senior year to sort of explore what happened, which all of them have a different perspective on what happened. And halfway through the dance, Elin disappears, and her 3 friends decide that they are going to find her without involving anybody else. So yeah, YA contemporary. I'm really great at this.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Kate Strohm. I'm the author of That's Not What I Heard. And in this book, Kim and Teddy are like the golden couple. They've been together forever until they break up kind of due to a misunderstanding in the spring of their senior year. And a rumor about the breakup travels through the whole school, and the entire school, including the teachers, end up taking sides in the breakup, and it escalates into kind of an all-out prank war. So that's what that's about.
Awesome. Okay, so obviously these are all very amazing and unique stories, but one common thread that kind of unites them all and what we're here to talk about today is the functionality of an ensemble cast. And if you aren't familiar listening with the term ensemble cast, the word ensemble, I pulled up the Google definition, so this is very official, is a group of items viewed as a whole rather than individually. And so what this means in terms of books is that there are a group of characters in all of these books, and all of these authors have crafted these group dynamics that have to come together and work in a really interesting way. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys about this because this is one of my favorite things in books ever. So first off, I wanted to ask you all, what draws you to ensemble casts in your writing? And was there ever a particular group in a piece of media that you consumed that really inspired you to write this sort of character dynamic?
I can go first. So for me, I always, when I read, I want to be in the heads of as many characters as possible, because I think that's one of the things that draws me to literature is the ability to be in someone else's head. And for this particular book, I haven't written a lot of ensemble casts. My first one kind of was one. And this one was very much inspired by Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. It's one of my favorite books, and there's just like tons and tons of characters in this confined little space together. And I've always loved how she can richly explore every single one of those characters, even though some are secondary and some are primary. And I kind of just wanted to do that. So that was the inspiration for this book, is I wanted to do my own bel canto. And then I like looped in Breakfast Club and I looped in climate change. And that's how we got to this book.
Those are two very important modern additions, is the Breakfast Club and climate change. I think those go very well together.
Yeah, I feel like I sort of agree with wanting to be in as many heads as possible. But there's also one of the things that really intrigues me about ensemble casts and just writing from different points of view is I love how point of view shapes how we see the world. I love how playing with different characters means you get to play with different perspectives on what's happening, different interpretations, maybe things that get lost in translation between one character and another. So for me, that's a lot of fun to play with, and I did it in my first book, This Is Where It Ends, and now in Even If We Break in particular, that's something I get to just enjoy a lot. There's also the fact that this is a group of teens who play RPGs together, so it's also very much inspired by all of my experience playing Dungeons and Dragons and other RPGs, and just the different experiences of each person at the table and how we all relate to adventures and what's going on, and just like the paranoia of trying to figure out what's happening.
I agree with everything that was already said. But one big reason why I was really drawn to writing an ensemble cast for my debut was when I was in high school, I didn't really have like that close, really good friend that a lot of kids, that it seemed to me at the time everyone else had. I was always in part of different groups depending on where I was in my life at the time. Like I was part of this marching band group, and I was part of a science Olympiad group. And so to me, when I try to get back into like a YA headspace, it just feels very natural to think about it in terms of group dynamics. And then when I knew I wanted to write a friendship book, so later in life, I did find those really close personal friends. And so I kind of wanted to merge the two things in my debut, which is like, it's a group of friends, and groups of friends just operate differently than two friends together. And so I wanted to make sure it was like an authentic group experience, like what reminded me of my high school experience, while still having that close personal friendship feel as well. And then, yeah, I just love how giving different characters their perspective on similar events helps you see what really happened in that moment, because everybody views everything so differently. And then in terms of books that have inspired me, I was a big Stephen King fan as a kid. And I read The Stand at probably an inappropriate age, but I just loved how much he had so many characters, and they all felt like authentic people to me. And so the idea of getting to do something like that always kind of felt like a really great challenge to me. So that's why I like ensemble casts.
Well, I primarily write romance, and one of my favorite things in romance books or romantic comedies is when it's not just the main couple that finds love, but like then his wacky best friend falls in love with her wacky best friend. I just love when all of these sort of side characters have like their own little promise of a romantic entanglement. And so a lot of that's not what I heard. The main couple is mostly broken up, but you get to see kind of all of these different beginning love stories with all of these other side characters. So it's sort of asking like, oh, what if the wacky side characters were all had an equal say in the story? And I mean, I don't know if it's just because I've been quarantined with a toddler for so long, but Toy Story, what an ensemble. Like they're all great friends. They're working together. There's romance. There's intrigue. I mean, I've been very inspired by Toy Story recently.
I think that's a great example. And I'm really glad that you bring up like romance and stuff, because that kind of leads into my second question, which was, do you find it like easier or more difficult? And those I know those are complicated and loaded words, but pretending that things are very black and white when it comes to writing, is it easier or more difficult to write that like big group dynamic versus kind of one-on-one character interactions and development?
I guess we can stick to the alphabetical theme. I don't know. I feel like one thing that's harder about ensemble casts is to really make sure that the voices are different from each other and that their interactions aren't, like no two people interact in the same way. And so I've got other books I've written where it's like two best friends and like I really can nail that dynamic down and I know what it sounds like and I know what each of the two characters is in that relationship. But when you add multiple and like, 5 or more characters, then all of a sudden, like, the way that this person is with the best friend versus the secondary best friend is going to be different. And yeah, just making all of those feel unique and authentic. I think it can be hard to achieve, but once you reach that draft where like they all sound like different interactions and different friendships, it's, I think, all the more satisfying.
Yeah, I think for me it depends a lot on the type of book I'm working on. Which is to say, when I'm working on like very plot-based books, when there's like a group of people reacting to something outside of them or something that involves all of them at the same time, I feel like I'm pretty comfortable writing ensemble casts. Whereas when it's smaller stories, and also quite literally like short stories for anthologies and such, and they tend to be slightly more personal, slightly more focused on like character interactions between the characters themselves, then I'm usually more comfortable writing like dual point of view or one-on-one. So yeah, I don't think there's necessarily one or the other that's easier, but to me it's very much dependent on, like I said, on context, on story, on what a story needs.
I agree. Like, I don't think one is easier or harder, but I think they have different challenges. I think that when you're writing an ensemble cast, you do get the benefit of getting to show these different perspectives and revealing different information in varying ways that maybe is more interesting to the reader in some respects. When you're writing, and maybe it's a multi-point of view thing versus a single point of view thing versus a dual narrator thing, but you always have to keep in mind if it's two characters interacting, especially if you're only showing the perspective of one character, there's probably other information that you want the reader to know, but obviously your one character doesn't know it. And so it's just a different sort of challenge as to like, how am I going to get the reader to understand that this other character has a very different perspective on this, and a lot of problems are less exciting if you just solve them with a reasonable adult conversation. So you can't go with the adult conversation, obviously. Like, you can't solve it with an email. But I think, so it's just two different challenges, I think. I agree with what Adi said about you want the dynamic to feel like it's authentic and all these people are reacting to the same thing differently. So that's the challenge there. But if you have the one perspective, then you can't let your author voice creep in and reveal information that shouldn't be revealed by the character you've chosen to narrate or to follow through your story. So I just think the challenges are different.
I've written one book that was dual POV, and it was actually the hardest thing I've written. I really struggled with it in a way that I found the 14 points of view, and that's not what I heard, a lot easier to do. And I think that some of it was because if I felt like I was having problems with one section or one voice, I would just kind of like hop to the next one, which was good. But I actually just finished something that is 4 points of view, and I found myself really playing favorites. So like I finished the whole book and realized that like one character's chapters, I just skipped all of them. And then I had to like go back and write the whole thing. So I think that the multiple narratives like really lends itself to my bad habits of playing favorites, but I find it easier to deal with.
So you kind of touched on this, and it kind of, I think you all a little bit actually kind of touched on it, but is there a moment in writing these group dynamics where they kind of sing, or like they're like they just click, you're like, yes, I've got it, whether it be like writing dialogue or just like a singular moment even where you're like, yeah, I like nailed it?
I think it's hard to really pinpoint it, other than with like a metaphor. My cat might be attacking me during this answering portion. Yeah, so I always describe it where like first drafts are kind of like assembling Frankenstein's monster, and you're just like taking all these pieces together and like making it look like a body. And eventually at some point, it's always going to happen in revision. I think it's different for every book and every writer at what point of that. Look at this. She's actively, Rachel, you can cut that out if we don't see it, but my cat is very fierce. She's just like gnawing on me. She just doesn't know how to love, is what we say. That's how she shows affection. So yeah, there's a point in every book that comes at a different time, but all of a sudden like lightning strikes and it comes alive. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly when that happens. It's like always one of the drafts probably towards the end, because everything after, like once it's alive, then you're just like tinkering and like putting makeup on the monster so that it's like shiny and pretty. But yeah, that moment when it comes alive.
For me, it's usually when the characters start arguing amongst each other. That's the point where I usually have that insight they all have different wants and needs, and they're all trying to get to their happily ever after, whatever that is. And obviously like first drafts for me are very much like figuring out the story and figuring out the main points, plot points, and everything else. And then like Adi said too, like there comes a point in revisions where all of the characters suddenly feel like they're their own person, and they all have their own like goal in the story. And for me that usually shows by all of them, like, or not necessarily even all of them, but some of them starting like arguments amongst themselves and trying to figure out their own way of solving what's happening. And that's usually the point where I feel like I get what they're trying to do, which feels like it sounds completely ridiculous, like it's happening all around me. And I'm definitely not one of those authors that characters speak to or anything like that. But at some point it just starts happening on the page, like you find yourself writing this weird argument, or these characters just all of them going their own way, and that's the point where I usually feel like, okay, I know what you're doing, you all obviously know what you're doing too, so let's just go with it.
So this is probably not a super helpful answer, but I think of it this way. In my other life, I'm a lawyer, and there's a famous Supreme Court case about pornography, kids. I hope you're aware, where the Supreme Court justice says, "I know it when I see it," and everybody quotes that, but the rest of the quote is, "and this is not that." So I think that when you're writing an ensemble cast, you know when it's not working. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now it is. And I think it, like some signs are like you need every character to feel like a true individual with their own unique perspective, that interact differently, that react to information differently. But that also that the way they all interact with each other is consistent with that and like authentic to that dynamic that you've created, as opposed to like, oh, I need the plot to do this thing, so now they're all going to do this thing. So I know that's not really helpful, but I just feel like when you, in your gut, you know when it's finally clicking, and then tragically, you know when it's not clicking.
I think that's actually a very good answer. I would not beat yourself up about that one. That was like pristine. I loved the use of the Supreme Court Justice quote in there.
Yeah, I feel like for me, if I know that anything's working, it's through dialogue. And specifically in ensemble cast, one thing I love is when like one of the first times two characters kind of cross paths who haven't really spent time together before, or sort of an unexpected meeting. And like once, if their two voices stay like true to who they are within that interaction, for me, that's the moment where I'm like, oh yes, like this is working. I know who they are. And I love kind of like the surprises that can come out of those like unexpected groupings within a larger ensemble.
Totally. Okay.
Just to kind of just add to that, like the dialogue for me is super important too. And I think one of the moments that I can usually tell it's working is when I'm scrolling through a manuscript while I'm doing revisions and my eyes fall on like a specific moment of dialogue or something happening, and I don't need to read the text to know which character it is. Like if I have that voice as clear as that, and it's clear enough that I can tell who is talking, who is doing something, then that's the point where I feel pretty confident in the ensemble as a whole working too.
And I think as a reader that also rings really true, because when I'm reading a book, if I cannot, need dialogue text to tell who's speaking, that's when I'm enjoying it the most too. So that I like that reciprocity between author and subject, I guess. Okay, so this is the point in the questions where we start to have a little fun and we turn away from craft and maybe more into like specific opinionated feelings for your books. So feel free to have fun, be a little silly, I encourage it. So some of you may be aware that the classic D&D party structure calls for a magic user, a healer, and a tank. How would you describe your own classic party structure? Is there a specific archetype you always need, such as like the nerd or the hot friend, or do you kind of play it by ear depending on the project?
Oh man, I'm trying to like think of my two ensemble books and see what are those like tropes or characters that I use. I feel like my main character is usually just like the quiet wise one, and I feel like because I like to think I'm funny, I'm always gonna have one character that's gonna be like comic relief, like the wisecracker. I just wrote one thing I've been doing in quarantine is like exploring other writing styles or formats, and so I just recently wrote a screenplay, and it has like just such a classic wisecracking, side character that comments on everything that's happening. And I think I have that in We Didn't Ask for This. I have like a kid who's into improv, and I think those are the same character more or less.
I definitely have geeks in all of my books. Usually gamers, usually specifically like tabletop RPG type gamers, which obviously in Even If We Break is all of them, but going back through my other books, they're in literally everyone. And I think another, like, I have quite a few jocks in books as well, which is weirdly enough like two sides of my own personality. I'm a huge gamer. I've been playing RPGs since Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I'm also a season pass holder at my local soccer club. So like sports are incredibly important to me. And those are two ways in which I like understand approaching the world. So it's something that comes through in most of my writing as well.
So something I didn't realize I was doing until after I completed a few manuscripts is I apparently always include like a mean girl with a heart of gold. So that's something that I just really like to throw in there and redeem that character a little bit. But one thing I think of, and there's this old TV show, I actually think it's still on the air. I cannot recommend it in good conscience because it's like terrible, but it's called It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And there was this one episode from like years ago where they come up with this scheme to sell gasoline door to door because it was at the same time the gas prices were really out of control. And they all decide like who's going to be who in the gang. And, like, for whatever reason, they're just like, you're the wild card. And like afterwards, like, you know, everything that went wrong is because that one character was just like wild card. And so, I feel like you need that in every single ensemble, like the one person who's going to mess up everything and then probably do that a few times throughout. I think if you have that, that really helps.
I think we were all muted just then, but literally everyone was laughing because I think we're all familiar with that show and we all know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's actually a really great pull for speaking of ensemble casts. Like if you want to picture a purely chaotic ensemble cast, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I love a nerdy boy love interest. Like, show me your collection of 20-sided die. Like, swoon. I'm there. But I feel like the two tropes I've found the two tropes I find myself coming back to again and again are like the bossy girl. Like, I love a girl with a bunch of binders who's just going to take charge of everything. And like an idiot bro who is a secret sensitive side.
I love that. I think if we combined all of what you've said, we would end up with like a funny improv like gang leader with support from a jock gamer and mean girl with the heart of gold and like the nerdy love interest. I would read that book in a heartbeat. So for future collaborative projects, maybe we've got something here. Okay. So say hypothetically, the world entered some dystopia type nightmare where we could all only leave our houses for essential goods and we had to spend months inside trapped with the same group of people, and that your ensemble cast was functioning as a social unit in the same house. How would they cope?
Well, it's funny. That is my book. It's a lock-in. And, you know, it's 200 plus kids all in the same place, but they can't leave. And I did just see a review. I try not to read reviews, but I think I got tagged in this one, or I forget. I was feeling insecure. And so I went to try to find good reviews. And one person gave it like 5 stars or 4 stars, but said, couldn't finish it because these kids can't leave. I can't leave. I don't want to read this right now. So I guess what they would do is exactly what they do. You know, for the kids that are holding the climate protest, they would be like, great, that worked out well. No, probably not, because it would kind of like put a damper on their, you know, the urgency of the people that they're trying to like push into action. That's all gone. Yeah, I'll let someone else answer. I feel like I wrote that book, so just read the book and you'll know.
Yeah, I feel like at least to some extent that holds true for even if we break two, in the sense that these are 5 teens getting stuck in a possibly haunted but definitely deadly cabin in the woods. So like there's nowhere else to go either. But I just thinking about that question, I feel like they would all respond to it in like a regular pandemic situation, like we're so used to by now. They will all respond to it differently. I think Finn and Ever would be pretty comfortable with it because they would both be gaming a lot and mostly just hating the fact that they can't see each other. I think out of the other characters, like obviously none of you know these characters, but you will hopefully when you read the book. Carter is one of those who would grow used to it and sort of learn to like appreciate it and start baking stuff and like find this having to rest and having to calm down as actually quite helpful, healthy, something like that. He probably wouldn't admit it, but you know, he'd be pretty okay with it. Like Maddie would be okay with it at first, and then try to bake stuff and mess up everything, and would easily grow to hate it. And then, like last of them, Liva is the character who is best at keeping a brave face throughout a possible quarantine. So I think she'd hate it, but just wouldn't tell anyone. Yeah, be kind of fun to see how they'd handle it, but I feel like it would be a lot calmer than, you know, a possible murder situation.
We all aspire to more comfortable than a possible murder situation. So, I mean, that's good. So my girls, what would they be up to? Rosie is living her best life. She's just like hanging out at home, reading books, eating snacks, like playing video games. Like this is how she would live her life if she could live her life this way. Elon's going outside, lots of hikes. They're in Park City, Utah, so mountains everywhere. So she's being outdoorsy. Jenna is scolding everybody on social media about how we all need to flatten the curve and like be aware of the social issues that are impacting everybody during this situation, and probably also baking a lot, like a lot of stress baking. And then Ket, who wild card, I guess. I don't know. Elon's actually the wild card, but she is doing her best to social distance, but like she's also like pushing the limits of like what is like really allowed. Like, can I go see my boyfriend? He's been isolating. I've been isolating. Like that math works out, you know what I mean? And so that's what she's up to.
I mean, I'd like to think they do well, but I don't think they would. Like it just rumor and gossip plays like such a huge part in this little ecosystem that they all live in. I know that within like the first, I want to say day, someone would be like, it's actually a nuclear apocalypse outside, and things would just spiral so out of control. They would like take to the streets rioting, you know, but like a fun riot kind of way. So yeah, I think they would all just totally implode into an extreme disaster situation.
I like that a lot. I think that's very honest. I will say, I think that it's the reaction in the real world to everything that's been going on has been most interesting from teenagers, because I'm just like, how are you guys? I think about it and like, how would I deal with this if I were still in high school and suddenly like my whole day is based around being able to go into a building with hundreds of other people? How would I like react to this? But kids are like very good at taking things in stride and being like, I don't know, whatever. So that's pretty good. I loved those answers. Okay, so this next one is going to be kind of like a rapid fire, like just answer the first thing that comes to your head. So if we were to assign ensemble cast superlatives for any of your works, you can pick the one you were just talking about, or if you have another ensemble cast you want to pull from, that's fine too. But I'm going to say a superlative, and then we'll just go down the line, and you just name a character who would get that superlative. So first, most likely to become president.
Marissa.
Liva.
Jenna.
Okay, and Stephanie had to step away, so we're just gonna keep going. Most likely to start a small forest fire.
Ooh. PJ. Maybe.
Probably Carter.
Ket. But Ewan would have been there.
Kind of a tag team situation.
Yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, best smile.
Probably Kenji. Say Kenji.
I feel like it depends on who you ask. Ever.
I'm gonna go with Ewan.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. Rachel, feel free to yell at me if that's not true. If you could cut and paste the characters from your story into any other story on the panel, or actually, if you want to open up to like any accessible common ground story that we think everybody here would like be familiar with, what world do you think they would do the best in?
I don't know how familiar the rest of you guys are with Sex Education on Netflix. Such a fantastic show, and I would love to see like these kids in my book are in such a unique circumstance. They're all locked in. They're like, you know, they're having to think about climate change and how it affects this all happens on a lock-in night, and it's like at this school it's the biggest night of the year, the most fun. So climate change is affecting this particular night because of the protest. But throughout all of this, and like teens these days are having to think about climate change, but they're also thinking about, you know, how to hook up with someone else, or like how to admit their love or whatever. And I would love to see, you know, these characters just in that situation, like going to Otis and Maeve from the show and being like, hey, how do I tell Marissa I think she's cute or whatever.
So since all of these characters are playing their RPG, it's a like homebrew RPG campaign system. Ever is a game master, and they made like the entire world for the rest of the group. And I think it'd be really interesting to see, like, obviously they play through their characters and they play in this world. It'd be really interesting to see the characters themselves, like the players themselves, in a sort of fantasy setting and see how that would work out. So I'd be very tempted, just because there's some, in terms of like inspiration, some comparisons between their game world and like Ketterdam from Six of Crows. Be really interested to see how the five of them make it in this very Dutch fantasy-like city.
So honestly, when I realized I was gonna be on this panel with I'm gonna say this wrong. Is it Marieke? Is that right?
Marieke.
Not right. Marieke.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no,
Okay,
it's definitely close. It's fine.
Okay, I have a friend named Marieke. It's spelled different, and I should just remember that. But okay. The Oracle book. Duh. Like, seriously, like, what teenage girl doesn't want to go meet Barbara Gordon and have like a cartoon version of herself? Like, so that's hands down the book that they want to get into.
I was also really excited because I just read Oracle Code like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, can we talk about superheroes a little bit maybe? Like, this is great.
I mean, I would want to be in the Oracle book, so there is that. Yeah. I feel that.
Exactly. Okay, so I think Rachel came back. So I think that we are out of time. If you guys want to go through one more time and just say your name and the name of your most recent book, I think that'll kind of do it for us. So thank you all again for coming. And one more time, my name is Alex Abraham, and I am so happy I got to host this. You were all wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for moderating, Alex. Rachel, thanks for putting it together. My name is Alsaid. My most recent book is We Didn't Ask for This.
Yeah, thank you both so much. This was fun, and also seeing faces right now is just great. So yeah, my name is Marieke Nijkamp, and these are my two 2020 books, because it seemed like fun to have two books in a pandemic year. Help.
I mean, when else would you have 2 books? I mean, yeah, I'm RuthAnne Snow, the author of When the Truth Unravels. This was super fun. Thanks to everybody. It was a good time. So,
Stephanie, we're just doing
what are we
sign
doing?
up. So if you just want to say one more time your name and the title of your most recent release.
Whee! I'm Stephanie Kate Strohm, the author of That's Not What I Heard.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for tuning into this panel. If you're looking for more panels like it, make sure you check out the All By My Shelf playlist on our YouTube page. It'll tell you all of the different panels that you're able to watch.